Hello everybody, welcome to Season 5 of the 1987 mod of Grand Prix Manager 2. Last season, Prost won for the 4th time in a row, and McLaren won for the 4th time in a row for the constructors. So, will this season be any different? Will someone finally stop Prost from winning? Will McLaren finally be defeated in the Constructors' Championship? Let's find out, but first, let's check the drivers who were competing last season who don't have a race seat for this season. So here is the list of drivers who were in Formula 1 last season who haven't got a race seat for this season. So Yannick Dalmes for Larousse, Scott Prout who was also from Larousse, and Eric Comas who was at Minardi last season, all are free agents. So with that said, let's get on with the driver lineup. First up, joint last place in last season is Ligier, who have kept the exact same driver lineup as last season with Keke Rosberg, Philippe Streiff and Palo Barella. Next up, the other team that's joint last place last season was Ags. They've got Derek Warwick as the driver number 1, who was driving at Zach speed last season. The other driver is Pascal Fabry, which they've kept from last season. And their test driver is Gabriel Tarquini, who last season was a free agent. Next up, in 10th place last season was Larousse, and Larousse have gone Oscar Laruri, who was Minardi's test driver last season, Jean Alesi, who was their driver number 1, who is demoted to driver number 2, and last up is Mike Thackwell, who last season was also a free agent, who didn't compete in Formula 1 last season. Next up, in 9th place was Arrows. They have the exact same driver lineup as they did last season with Cheever, Scapini and Dumfries. They're all using the same engine supplier, so basically nothing has changed with Arrows. The next team, tied in 7th place last season, is Minardi. Minardi is still using Renauit engines. I tried to get other engine suppliers, but guess what? They all said no, because they apparently didn't have enough money. Either we were not good enough in the championship, or we were financially insecure. But Renault are like the only suppliers who actually supplies engines at all. Amati, who was driver number 2 last season, is driver number 1. Yari Norman, who is Ag's test driver, is the driver number 2, replacing Laruri. And Adrian Campos, who was a free agent last season, is our new test driver. The other team that tied in 7th last season is Zach Speed. Nelson Piquet, who was driving at Williams last season, is the driver number 1. Gerhard Berger, who was driver number 1, is now the driver number 2 for Zach Speed, and Chris Nissen still remains as their test driver. In 6th place we have Brabham. Brabham have the exact same driver lineup and the same engine supplier as last season, Mansell, Boutsen and Gonzani, and BMW powered engines. Next up, in 5th place we have Benetton. Once again, Benetton are using the same engine suppliers and the same drivers as last season. Andrew Cesaris, Alessandro Nannini, Willie Rebs, and Ford-powered engines. Next up, in 4th place we have Williams. Stefan Johansson, who was McLaren's test driver last season, is the driver number 1 to replace Nelson Piquet. Philippe Alliot is still driver number 2. Jean-Louis Schlesser is still the test driver for Williams. Now, in 3rd place we have Ferrari. Ferrari are using the same drivers last season, Alboreto, Brundle, Mondina. However, Ferrari are no longer using Honda engines and instead decided to use Ford engines. Next up, the runners-up from last season is Lotus. Satoru Nakajima is promoted to driver number 1. However, replacing Senna is Roberto Moreno, who was driving at Ags last season. Joachim Winkelhock is the test driver. Last but not least, it is the champions from last season, McLaren. McLaren have Alain Prost as the driver number 1 still. Ayrton Senna has taken over Riccardo Patrese place to be the driver number 2 for McLaren, and Riccardo Patrese has been demoted to the test driver. Now that's all the drivers' lineup completed, it is now time for the first round of the season. Before we kick off the first round of the season, here is the full transfer list of Season 5 of Formula 1. And now it's on to round 1 of the season at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Amati taking pole position for Minardi. Gerhard Berger second for Zach Speed. Both Williams drivers 3rd and 4th. Nelson Piquet in the other Zach Speed is 5th. and Philippe Felice rounds up the top 6. Jari Neumann 8th on the grid for Minardi. As you can see, there are only 23 drivers on that made the qualifying times because Fabre was still injured from last season and Ags is still reluctant to put a test driver in to take his place. So Laruri, Scapini and Boutsen for Brabham, Arrows and Lewis respectively would not be taking part for the Grand Prix. After the start of the race, Alessandro Nini, who qualified last place in the grid, stalled his car so he was out of the Grand Prix. Meanwhile, both Minardi drivers kept their positions of 1st and 8th. After both Minardis made their first pit stops of the race, Berger was leading the race for Zach Speed, Johansson 2nd for Williams, 3rd is PK for the other Zach Speed, Rosberg 4th for Ligier, and Amati 5th for Minardi, and rounding out the top 6 is Philippe Alliot for Williams. After both Minardis made their second pit stops of the race, in the lead of the Grand Prix was Nelson Piquet for Zach Speed, in 2nd was Gerhard Berger for the other Zach Speed, both Williamses were 3rd and 4th, Martin Brundle 5th for Ferrari, and rounding the top 6 Ayrton Senna for McLaren, and Giovanni Amati soon retired from the Grand Prix. After Jari Neumann made his 3rd pit stop of the race, yes he did 3 in this Grand Prix, both Zach Speeds were leading the race, both Williams 3rd and 4th, Brundle 5th for Ferrari, and Ayrton Senna running off the top 6. Lap 53 of the Brazilian Grand Prix, and Jari Neumann, the last of the runner, ended up retiring from the Grand Prix. So first race of the season, and it's a double DNF for the Minardis. The race soon came to an end with Nelson Piquet winning the Brazilian Grand Prix in his Zach Speed. Philippe Alliot 2nd for Williams. 3rd is Martin Brundle for Ferrari. Berger 4th for the other Zach Speed. Stefan Johansson 5th for Williams, and the final point went to Ayrton Senna for McLaren. Round 2 is San Marino Grand Prix at Imola. Satoru Nakajima is in pole position for Lotus, both Ferraris are 2nd and 3rd on the grid. Moreno, the other Lotus driver, is 4th on the grid, and rounding off the top 6 is both Williams drivers. McLaren, who've won all 4 seasons of the Constructors' Championship so far, are on the 5th row of the grid, interestingly. However, the Minardi driver of Jari Neumann is last on the grid, and as you can see, Giovanni Amati did not set a lap time because she crashed out before even setting a lap time whatsoever. So Giovanni Amati is not taking part. Off at the start of the race, Neumann kept his position, which is 23rd. Lap 2 of the Grand Prix, and Thierry Boutsen from 7th place got a 10-second stop-go penalty from 7th and dropped down to 17th. Lap 13 of the San Marino Grand Prix, and Jari Neumann retired from the Grand Prix, so technically a double DNF for Minardi since Giovanni Amati didn't even take part in this race. At the end of the race, Nakajima won the San Marino Grand Prix for Lotus, with both Ferrari drivers taking the other 2 podium spots. Johansson getting 4th for Williams, Alain Prost 5th for McLaren, and round the top 6 is Nigel Mansell of Brabham. We go from lap 13 straight to the end of the race because after Neurman's retirement, there literally was no highlight to give to you guys. I mean, I would have loved to put something else in between, but there was just nothing. There was just nothing worth noting in between lap 13 to the end. So really sorry about that, guys, but if there's nothing I can comment on, there's no point in me just showing it. Round 3 of the season is the Italian Grand Prix at Monza. Alboreto is in pole position for Ferrari, both McLarens are 2nd and 3rd on the grid, both Lotuses 4th and 5th on the grid, and the other Ferrari driver of Martin Brundle running off the top 6. Meanwhile, both Minardi drivers are 8th and 9th on the grid, and the only 2 drivers who did make the 107% time who wouldn't be taking part for the Grand Prix were Echu for Arrows and Jean Alesi for Larousse. Off at the start of this Grand Prix, both Minardis kept their positions of 8th and 9th. Lap 7 of the Italian Grand Prix, and Jari Neumann retires from the Grand Prix from 9th place. After Amati made her first pit stop of the Grand Prix, Alboreto was leading the race with Prost in 2nd, Nakajima 3rd, Senna 4th, Moreno 5th, and Brundle running off the top 6. Meanwhile, Giovanni Amati retires from the Grand Prix from 9th place. Lap 46 of the Italian Grand Prix, Stefan Johansson, who climbed up to 5th in his Williams, ended up retiring from the Grand Prix along with a mid-pack driver of Nelson Piquet in the Zach Speed. That pushed Martin Brundle, who has fallen out of the top 6, back into the top 6. Lap 52 of the Grand Prix, back Marco Fabio retired, but also so did Roberto Moreno from 5th place in his Lotus, and then Martin Brundle, who climbed to 5th, retired in his Ferrari along with one of the Brabham drivers. As the race soon ended with Alain Prost winning the Grand Prix, with Nakajima in 2nd, Alboreto 3rd, Ayrton Senna 4th, Martin Brundle still getting classified as 5th in his Ferrari, and the final driver to score a point was Andrew Chesler to Benetton. And as you see, Brundle ran out of fuel, Boutsen ran out of fuel, and Moreno all ran out of fuel. What a way to go to end our Grand Prix. After that dramatic ending to the Italian Grand Prix, 2 drivers were injured or unwell for the next race. Alain Prost would miss out only for the next race of the season, while Pascal Fabry, who only came back after the first race of the season, is injured again and is out for 3 more races for Ags. Round 4 in Monte Carlo. Giovanni Matti taking pole position for Minardi, Satoru Nakajima 6th for Lotus, Ayrton Senna 3rd for McLaren, Stefan Johansson 4th for the Williams, and both Ferrari drivers running off the top 6, with Jari Neurman in 10th place in the grid. And of the 22 drivers taking part, the only driver who did make the 107% time is Keke Rosberg, and the 2 drivers missing from the timetable are the test drivers for McLaren and Ags, since Fabry and Prost are injured. During the formation lap, Jari Neurman, who qualified 10th in the grid, stalled his car, so he had to start from the pit lane. And once the race got underway, Amati kept on to the lead of the race, while Neurman obviously came into the pit from last place. Once both Minardi made their first pit stops of the Grand Prix, Ayrton Senna was leading the race with Alboreto in 2nd, Boutsen 3rd for Brabham, Mansell 4th in the other Brabham, and the 2 Lotus drivers rounded off the top 6. Lap 40 of the Grand Prix, and Jari Neurman, the last of the runner, had retired from the Grand Prix. After Amati made her 2nd pit stop of the Grand Prix, Senna was leading the race with Piquet 6th for Zach Speed. 3rd place is Nigel Mansell for Brabham, Stefan Johansson 4th for Williams, Nakajima 5th for Lotus, and Alboreto running off the top 6 in his Ferrari. The race soon came to an end with Ayrton Senna winning the Monaco Grand Prix, with Thierry Boutsen taking 2nd for Brabham, Nelson Piquet 3rd in the Zach Speed, Johansson 4th for Williams, Nakajima getting 5th for Lotus, and Nigel Mansell running off the top 6 in the other Brabham. So after 4 races, Nakajima with 17 points is 4 points ahead of Ayrton Senna and Piquet, who both have 13 points each, who are a further 2 points ahead of Alain Prost, the 4-time champion in this mod in the other McLaren. And in the Constructors' Championship, we see that McLaren have a 4-point lead over Ferrari, who are a further 3 points ahead of Lotus, who are a further 1 point ahead of Zach Speed in 4th place. Round 4 of the season is the German Grand Prix at the Nürburgring. Giovanni Amati in pole position for Minardi, Philippe Alliot 6th for Williams, then both Lotus drivers, and then both Ferrari drivers running off the top 6, with the other Minardi driver of Jari Neurman 9th in the grid. The 4-time champion Alain Prost is 12th in the grid, with his McLaren teammate of Ayrton Senna just in front of him in 11th. Up at the start of this Grand Prix, the 2 Minardi drivers held on to their positions, which were 1st and 9th. After the Minardi drivers made their first pit stops of the Grand Prix, Philippe Alliot was leading for Williams, Amati 2nd for Minardi, Moreno 3rd for Lotus, Brundle 4th for Ferrari, Nelson Piquet 5th for Zach Speed, and Satoru Nakajima in the other Lotus rounding off the top 6. After both Minardi made their 2nd and final pit stops of the Grand Prix, Philippe Alliot was leading for Williams, with Alboreto 2nd for Ferrari, Nigel Mansell 3rd for Brabham, with Ayrton Senna 4th for McLaren, Giovanni Amati 5th for Minardi, and rounding off the top 6 is Satoru Nakajima for Lotus. The race soon came to an end with Philippe Alliot winning the German Grand Prix in his Williams, Alboreto 2nd for Ferrari, Nigel Mansell 3rd for Brabham, Ayrton Senna 4th for McLaren, Giovanni Amati 5th for Minardi, and Satoru Nakajima gained the final point in his Lotus. Round 6 is the French Grand Prix Paul Ricard with 80% taking pole position, Martin Brundle 2nd for Ferrari, Giovanni Amati 3rd for Minardi, Alain Prost 4th for McLaren, and both Lotus drivers rounding off the top 6 in their Lotuses. The other Minardi driver is Jari Neumann in 15th on the grid. Off at the start of the race, the two Minardi drivers kept their positions of 3rd and 15th. Lap 19 of the French Grand Prix, and retired for the Grand Prix was Satoru Nakajima, who was in 5th place in his Lotus, and he was currently the championship leader of the season, while Stefan Johansson getting into the points position thanks to Nakajima's retirement. After the Minardis made their first pit stop of the Grand Prix, Ayrton was leading the race for McLaren, Brundle 2nd for Ferrari, Alio 3rd for Williams, Moreno 4th for Lotus, Prost 5th for McLaren, and Michele Alboreto rounding up the top 6 for Ferrari. Meanwhile, Ayrton Senna, in the lead of the Grand Prix, has retired for the Grand Prix along with Giovanni Amati, who was in 9th for Minardi. That pushed Stefan Johansson into the top 6. After Neumann made his second and final pit stop of the Grand Prix, both Ferraris were 1st and 2nd. There was both Williams drivers, Prost in 5th, and Roberto Murillo rounding up the top 6 in his Lotus. The race came to an end with the Ferraris finishing 1st and 2nd. Then it was the Williams drivers, then it was Prost in 5th for his McLaren, and Roberto Murillo gained the final point for Lotus in 6th place. Round 7 is the British Grand Prix at Silverstone, with both McLarens taking the front row of the grid. Roberto Moreno 3rd place for Lotus, Michele Alboreto 4th for Ferrari, Satoru Nakajima 5th for Lotus, and rounding up the top 6 was Martin Brundle in the other Ferrari. The two Minardi drivers are 8th and 10th on the grid, and the 3 drivers who failed to make the 107% time and would be taking part of the Grand Prix were Eddie Cheer for Arrows and both the Rus drivers of Oscar Laruri and Jean Alesi. Off at the start of the race, the two McLaren drivers of Jari Neumann and Giovanni Amati gained a position each as Satoru Nakajima fell to last place and retired from the Grand Prix on the very first lap. Lap 17 of the Grand Prix, and Giovanni Amati retired for the Grand Prix from 12th place. After Neumann made his first pit stop of the Grand Prix, both McLarens are still leading the Grand Prix, with Moreno 3rd for Lotus. Both Ferrari drivers are 4th and 5th, and round the top 6 was Philippe Alliot for Williams. Lap 29 of the British Grand Prix, and Jari Neumann from 13th place retired, so it was yet another double DNF for Minardi. Sadly, there was literally nothing else to talk about, so right at the end of the race, both McLarens got a 1-2 finish, Moreno 3rd for Lotus, both Ferraris 4th and 5th, and Philippe Alliot rounded off the top 6. Round 8 is the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim. Satoru Nakajima, the current championship leader, is in pole position. Andrew Cesaris for Benetton is in 2nd. Moreno 3rd for Lotus. Alessandro Nini, the other Benetton, is in 4th. Michele Alboreto 5th for Ferrari. And Philippe Alliot rounding off the top 6. While Jari Neumann is 11th and Giovanni Amati 18th on the grid. As you can see, there are 4 drivers missing. Both McLaren drivers and both Ligier drivers didn't even set a lap time, so those 4 drivers would be racing for the Grand Prix. And the other 3 that also would be taking part were Oscar Laruri for the Rus, Nelson Piquet for Zach Speed, and Giovanni Amati for Minardi. Jari Neumann didn't appear for the German Grand Prix, so basically neither Minardi drivers actually took part in this Grand Prix at all. Sadly, this was such a boring race, so it's literally nothing to highlight on because literally nothing happened. So Nakajima won, Alboreto 2nd, Johansson 3rd, Cesaris 4th, Roberto Murillo 5th, and Nigel Mansell round the top 6. That's practically all you really need to know about that Grand Prix, because literally nothing happened apart from one retirement, but it was Pascal Fabry, who's one of the backmarker teams. After 8 rounds, the driver leading the championship is Alboreto with 4 more points than Nakajima, who is only 2 points ahead of Senna in 3rd place for McLaren. And in the Constructors' Championship, we see the leader is Ferrari, who have a 8-point lead over McLaren, who were a further 9 points ahead of Williams and not Lotus. Round 9 was the Hungarian Grand Prix at the Hungaroring. Both Lotus were on the front row of the grid. Michele Alboreto 3rd for Ferrari, Ayrton Senna 4th for McLaren, Martin Brundle 5th for Ferrari, and Alain Prost rounded off the top 6 for McLaren, while both Minardi drivers qualified 8th and 14th on the grid, and the 3 drivers who did make the 107% time who weren't going to take part of the Grand Prix were Oscar LaRue for Larousse, Eddie Cheever for Arrows, and Nigel Mansell for Brabham. At the start of the Grand Prix, Jari Neumann held on to his position of 8th, while Giovanni Amati fell down to 15th on the grid. After the Minardis made their first pits of the Grand Prix to change tyres during the wet conditions to dry conditions, leading the Grand Prix was Roberto Moreno. Nakajima is in 2nd, Alboreto 3rd for Ferrari, Senna 4th for McLaren, Brundle 5th for Ferrari, and Alain Prost 6th for McLaren. Lap 29 of the Hungarian Grand Prix, Giovanni Amati, who was the last of the runners, retired from the Grand Prix. Alain Neumann made his second pit stop of the Grand Prix. Nakajima was leading the race, then it was both Ferraris. Prost was in 4th for McLaren, Moreno 5th for Lotus, and running off the top 6, Stefan Johansson for Williams. After Neumann made a third pit stop in this Grand Prix because of the changing weather conditions yet again, Alboreto was leading the Grand Prix with Nakajima in 2nd, Moreno 3rd for Lotus, Brundle 4th for Ferrari, and Prost 5th for McLaren, and running off the top 6 was Stefan Johansson for Williams. Lap 73 of the Grand Prix, and Stefan Johansson, who was in 6th place, retired from the Grand Prix, which pushed Ayrton Senna into the top 6 in his McLaren. The race came to an end with Alboreto winning the Hungarian Grand Prix in his Ferrari, Satoru Nakajima 2nd for Lotus, Martin Brundle 3rd for the other Ferrari, Roberto Moreno 4th for Lotus, and both McLaren drivers with Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna rounded off the top 6. Round 10 is the Austrian Grand Prix at Österreich. Both McLarens rocking out the front row of the grid, with both Lotuses rocking out the second row, and rocking out the third row was both Ferraris. Jari Neumann is in 8th place from his Minardi, and Giovanni Amati 17th. And the 3 drivers who did make the 107% time and wouldn't be taking part were both the Larousse drivers and Franco Scappini for Arrows. At the start of the race, Giovanni Amati dropped down to 18th, while Jari Neumann jumped 2 places to get into the top 6. Lap 16, and Giovanni Amati from 16th place retired along with Alessandro Nini, who was ahead, and Philippe Streiff, who was directly behind. After Neumann made his first pit stop of the Grand Prix, Alain Prost was leading the race with Alboreto 2nd, Moreno 3rd for Lotus, 4th for Ayrton Senna in the McLaren, Nakajima 5th for Lotus, and Stefan Johansson rounding up the top 6 against Williams. Meanwhile, Jari Neumann retires from the Grand Prix, so another double DNF for Minardi. Lap 38 of the Grand Prix, and Alain Prost and Roberto Moreno, who were 1st and 3rd, both retired from the Grand Prix. That pushed Andrew De Cesaris in the Benetton and Nigel Mansell Brabham into the top 6. This is not looking good for Alain Prost in his attempt to win his 5th championship in a row in this mod. The race soon ended with Michele Alboreto winning the Austrian Grand Prix, with Ayrton Senna 2nd in the McLaren, Satoru Nakajima 3rd for Lotus, Stefan Johansson 4th for Williams, Andrew De Cesaris 5th for Benetton, and rounding off the top 6 was Nigel Mansell for Brabham. After the 10th round of the season, there were 2 more injuries this season. Alessandro Nini would be missing the next race in his bet for Benetton, while Philippe Streiff would be missing 2 races for Ligier. Round 11 is the Canadian Grand Prix at Montreal. Both Williams drivers lock up the front row. Derek Warwick for Ags is in 3rd. Both Zach Speed drivers are 4th and 5th. And running off the top 6 is Pascal Fabry for Ags. Giovanni Amati for Minardi qualified in 8th, while Jari Neumann did not qualify at all. The championship contenders of Alboreto in 12th and Satoru Nakajima in 13th, while the 4-time champion of Alain Prost is 9th, and 2 drivers did not set lap time, Jari Neumann for Minardi, and of course the Ligier will not let their test driver take part. However, the 3 other drivers who didn't make the 107% time and wouldn't be taking part anyway are both the LaRousse drivers and Franco Scappini for Arrows. For the start of the Grand Prix, Giovanna Matti kept her position of 8th place in her Minardi. After Matti made her first pit stop of the Grand Prix, both Williams drivers were still leading the Grand Prix with Warwick in 3rd, both Zach Speeds 4th and 5th, and Pascal Fabry rounding off the top 6. After Matti made her second pit stop of the Grand Prix because of interchanging conditions, both Williams were still leading the Grand Prix, Berger 3rd for Zach Speed, Warwick 4th for Ags, PK 5th for the other Zach Speed, and Pascal Fabry for the other Ags driver is rounding off the top 6. Lap 49 of the Canadian Grand Prix and Giovanna Matti retires from the Grand Prix. The race soon came to an end with the winner of the Grand Prix being Stefan Johansson for Williams, his teammate Alio came in 2nd, both Zach Speed 3rd and 4th, Derek Warwick getting 5th for Ags, and Ayrton Senna getting the final point in the McLaren. Round 12 is the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa-Francorchamps. Both Ferraris getting the front row of the grid, the second row going to McLaren, and the third row of the grid are the Lotus drivers. The two Minardi drivers are 12th and 19th on the grid, while Alessandro Nannini, who was replaced by William Ribbs in the last Grand Prix, which I forgot to mention, has returned and qualified 12th, directly behind his teammate Angelo Cesaris. And the only driver that's not qualified is Ligier, the second Ligier driver. Off the start of the Grand Prix, Roberto Moreno, who qualified in 5th on the grid, stalled his car. Meanwhile, Giovanna Matti held him to her position, as Jari Norman ended up not starting this Grand Prix at all, as he's disappeared before the race started. Lap 15 of the Grand Prix, Michele Alboreto retired from the Grand Prix along with Pascal Fabry, who was in the midfield. That pushed Philippe Alliot to 6th, and it's definitely putting Alboreto's championship lead in jeopardy. After Matti made her first pit stop of the Grand Prix, Prost was leading the race with Nakajima in 2nd, Ayrton Senna 3rd for McLaren, Mansell 4th for Brabham, Boots in 5th also for Brabham, and round the top 6 was Philippe Alliot for Williams. Lap 27 of the Belgian Grand Prix, and Philippe Alliot retired from the Grand Prix along with Giovanna Matti, who was one of the last of the runners. That definitely pushed his teammate Stefan Johansson into the top 6. The race came to an end with Prost winning the Belgian Grand Prix, with Nakajima taking 2nd, Senna 3rd for McLaren, Nigel Mansell 4th for Brabham, Stefan Johansson 5th for Williams, and Angelo Cesaris rounding off the top 6 in the Benetton. With 12 rounds complete, it was now time to take a look at the Drivers and Constructors Championship. In the Drivers' Championship, Alboreto has a 6-point lead over Nakajima, who was a further 6 points ahead of Senna in the McLaren. And in the Constructors' Championship, Ferrari have a 7-point lead over McLaren, who were a further 12 points ahead of Williams in 3rd. Round 13 is the Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez. Ayrton Senna gained pole position for McLaren, with Satoru Nakajima in 2nd, Alain Prost 3rd in the other McLaren, Roberto Moreno in 4th in the other Lotus, Philippe Alliot 5th for Williams, and Michele Alboreto rounding off the top 6 in the Ferrari. Meanwhile, the two Minardi drivers qualified 18th and 24th, as Philippe Streif did eventually return to Formula 1, who qualified 21st for Ligier. The three drivers who didn't make the 107% time would be taking part with Jari Norman for Minardi, Derek Warwick for Ags, and Oscar Leroux for LaRousse. All for the start of the race, Giovanna Matti kept on to her position, which was 18th. Lap 28 of the Grand Prix, and Roberto Moreno, who was in 6th place, retired for the Grand Prix along with Nelson Piquet, who was in the midfield. That pushed Philippe Alliot in the Williams into the top 6. Meanwhile, after Giovanna Matti made her pit stop of the Grand Prix, Ayrton Senna was leading the Grand Prix with Nakajima in 2nd, Prost 3rd for McLaren, Alliot 4th for Williams, and both Ferrari drivers rounding off the top 6. Lap 42 of the Spanish Grand Prix, and Philippe Alliot from 3rd place retired from the Grand Prix along with backmarker Jean Alesi. That pushed Stefan Johansson, his teammate, into the top 6. After Matti made her second and final pit stop of the Grand Prix, Senna was leading the race with Nakajima in 2nd, Prost 3rd for the other McLaren, both Ferraris 4th and 5th, as Stefan Johansson ran off the top 6 right before he retired from the Grand Prix, which meant Angela Chesler was in the top 6 for Benetton. The race ended with Ayrton Senna winning the Spanish Grand Prix with Satoru Nakajima in 2nd, Alain Prost 3rd for McLaren, both Ferraris 4th and 5th, and Angela Chesler getting the final point for Benetton in 6th place. Round 14 was the Mexican Grand Prix at Mexico City, both McLarens locking out the front row, Giovanni Matti 3rd for Minardi, Satoru Nakajima 4th for Lotus, and rounding off the top 6 were Martin Brundle and Alboreto joined for Ferrari. The other Minardi driver of Jari Nurman is in 11th in the grid, and the 3 drivers who didn't make the 107% time and wouldn't be taking part of the Grand Prix were Franco Scappini for Arrows, Oscar Laruri for the Rus, and Eddie Cheever in the other Arrows. At the start of the Grand Prix, the 2 Minardi drivers kept their positions of 3rd and 11th. Lap 11 and Michele Alboreto from 5th place retired from the Grand Prix, which could open the door for him to lose the lead of this championship, as Nelson Piquet is pushed into the top 6 for Zach Speed. After both Minardis made their first pit stops of the Grand Prix, both McLarens were 1st and 2nd, then it was Martin Brundle, both Lotus drivers, and Nelson Piquet ran off the top 6 in the Zach Speed. Lap 42 of the Mexican Grand Prix, and Nelson Piquet from 6th place retired from the Grand Prix along with one of the back markers of Philippe Streiff in the Ligier, which pushed Stefan Johansson into the top 6 in his Williams. After both Minardi made their second pit stops of the Grand Prix, both McLarens were leading the race with Martin Brundle in 3rd, both Lotus 4th and 5th, and Stefan Johansson rounding off the top 6. Lap 55, in between the times both Minardi drivers came for their 3rd and final stops, Ayrton Senna retired from the lead of the Grand Prix, which was going to push Angela Chesler in the Benetton into the top 6, and also relinquish the lead to his teammate Alain Prost. The race soon ended with Alain Prost winning the Mexican Grand Prix, with Martin Brundle in the Ferrari taking 2nd, Roberto Moreno 3rd in the Lotus, Nakajima 4th in the other Lotus, Stefan Johansson 5th for Williams, and rounding up the top 6 is Angela Chesler for the Benetton. With 2 rounds left to go, it was now time to see who was in contention to win the Drivers' Championship. And Satoru Nakajima has a 1-point lead over Alboreto, who is a further 5 points ahead of Ayrton Senna in the McLaren, while Alain Prost was also with a slim chance of winning the Drivers' Championship at this stage. And meanwhile, in the Constructors' Championship, currently leading was McLaren with a 4-point lead over Ferrari, who were a further 19 points ahead of Lotus in 3rd. Meanwhile, Arrows have officially gone bankrupt, so that means Eddie Cheever, Franco Scappini and Johnny Dumfries were now out of Formula 1 because obviously Arrows went bankrupt, which by the way in the last Grand Prix they did make the 107% time and they weren't able to start the Grand Prix, so them failing to start the race was pretty much the final nail in the coffin for Arrows. And just to update the drivers' transfer tables, here is Eddie Cheever, Frank Scappini and Johnny Dumfries being marked as out of F1. Round 15, the Japanese Grand Prix of Suzuka. Both Williams drivers look at the front row. Angela Chesler is 3rd for Benetton, Nigel Mansell 4th for Brabham, Derek Warwick 5th for Ags, and Giovanni Matti rounding off the top 6 for Minardi, while the other Minardi driver of Jari Nurman is in 14th in the grid. And meanwhile, the 4 championship contenders of Alboreto, Nakajima and both McLaren drivers are 16th, 18th, 19th and 20th on the grid. After the start of the race, the 2 Minardi drivers kept onto their positions of 6th and 14th. Lap 6 of the Grand Prix, and Roberto Moreno from 19th retired from the Grand Prix. Even though Roberto Moreno isn't fighting for the championship, him retiring from the Grand Prix has pretty much made it impossible for Lotus to catch the McLaren and Ferrari drivers at this stage. So Roberto Moreno retiring could mean Lotus were going to be out of winning the Constructors' Championship this season. After both Minardi did their first pit stops of the Grand Prix, both Williams drivers was leading, with Chesler 3rd for Benetton, Mansell 4th for Brabham, Derek Warwick 5th for Ags, and Giovanni Matti ran at the top 6. Meanwhile, at the back of the grid, Nuremberg retired for Minardi, but also Satoru Nakajima retired, who, remember, is leading the championship with a 1-point lead over Alboreto. So this would have opened the door for Alboreto to possibly outscore Nakajima coming before the final Grand Prix of the season. After Matti made her second and final pit stop of the Grand Prix, both Williams were still leading the race, with De Cesaris in third, Mansell in fourth, PK fifth for Zach Speed, and Derek Warwick running off the top 6 for Ags. Lap 48 of the Grand Prix, and Stefan Johansson from the lead of the Grand Prix retires from the race, which pushed his teammate Alio into first, and Giovanni Matti and the Minardi into a points position. The race soon ended with Philippe Alliot winning the Japanese Grand Prix for Williams, Andrew De Cesaris taking second for Benetton, Nigel Mansell third for Brabham, fourth for Nelson Piquet for Zach Speed, Derek Warwick fifth for Ags, and right off the top 6 is Giovanni and Matti for the Minardi. With one race to go, it was now time to check the Drivers and the Constructors' Championship. Meanwhile, none of the top 4 drivers in the championship scored any points, so the top 4 pretty much remained the same, but these 4 drivers can still win this season of the Formula 1 1987 Grand Prix 2 mod, Grand Prix Manager 2 1987 mod for season 5, that's what I'm trying to say. And in the Constructors' Championship, Lotus are pretty much out of the running because they don't have enough. They won't have enough points to catch McLaren. Even if they did get a 1-2 finish, they'll still be, I believe, 3 points short. Yeah, so if they got 16, even if they've got 16 points, they'd be 7 points short from McLaren. So it was either going to be Ferrari or McLaren to win this season's Constructors' Championship. The 16th and final round at Adelaide for the Australian Grand Prix sees Ayrton Senna in pole position, Martin Brundle in second, Alain Prost third for McLaren, Satoru Nakajima fourth for Lotus, Michele Alboreto fifth for Ferrari, and right at the top 6 was Roberto Moreno for Lotus. Well, the 2 Minardi drivers are 10th and 13th on the grid, and the 3 drivers not taking part for this race are both the Ligiers and Oscar Leroux for the Roos. As things stand on the grid, McLaren would win the Constructors' Championship, and also Satoru Nakajima would do just enough to beat Senna, Prost and Alboreto for the title this season, as things currently stand, judging by the grid. Off at the start of the Grand Prix, Giovanna gained a position to get into 9th, while Jari Nurman fell down to 14th. Lap 21 of the Australian Grand Prix, and Jari Nurman from 17th retired from the Grand Prix. After Matti made her first pit stop of the Grand Prix, both McLarens were first and second, Brundle third for Ferrari, both Lotus fourth and fifth, and now Brett around the top 6. So as it stands, Senna and Nakajima would be tying for the top, while meanwhile McLaren would be winning the Constructors' Championship as things were currently standing. After Matti made her second and final pit stop of the race, both McLarens were first. No, Senna was in first, then it was both Lotus second and third, Prost in fourth, Brundle fifth, and Alboreto in the top 6. So now it looked like Nakajima was going to win the Drivers' Championship, as the gap between Senna and Nakajima would only be closed down by 3 points. The race soon ended with Ayrton Senna winning the Australian Grand Prix. Satoru Nakajima, who has won this Drivers' Championship, finished in second, Alain Prost taking third for McLaren, Roberto Moreno fourth for Lotus, and both Ferraris ran out the top 6, so McLaren have secured their 5th Constructors' Championship in a row. Here is the drive standings for the final time on this season of the 1987 mod. Satoru Nakajima beating Ayrton Senna by only 3 points this season, who in turn was only a further 3 points ahead of Michele Alboreto in the Ferrari. The other McLaren driver, Alain Prost, with 47 points, got off to a bad start of the season and just wasn't able to rack up enough points to catch up. Then we have an 11-point gap between Prost and Brundle in the other Ferrari, who got 5th, who was only 2 points ahead of the top Williams driver Philippe Alliot, who was only 2 further points ahead of his own teammate Stefan Johansson. And then the best of the rest was Nelson Piquet in the Zach Speed in 8th place. Looking at the second page, we see Roberto Moreno, who is the champion's teammate with 58 points, only scoring 17 for Lotus, which is very, very disappointing for the Lotus, despite the fact their other driver won the season. Then we have Andrew Chesers and Nigel Mansell for Benetton and Brabham, both sharing 15 points each. The other Zach Speed driver of Gerhard Berger only scoring 7 points, one more than Thierry Boutsen in the other Brabham. And then Derek Warwick for Axe getting 4 points this season, and the final point scorer is Giovanni Amati in 15th place with 3 points. And then we have Alessandro Nini in the Benetton getting no points. Looking further down the list, we have Willie Rebs, the reserves driver for Benetton, who only made one appearance in Canada this season, so him scoring no points is actually okay. Then we have H.M. and Franco Scapini, who were at the bankrupt Arrows with no points. Both Ligiers of Keke Rosberg and Philippe Struve, and both the Rousses of Jean Alesi and Oscar Leroux with no points. And there was also Yari Nurman with no points. And then Pascal Fabry, who is pretty much injury prone this season. I think he missed a total of 4 races this season, which is the most out of everyone in the season, and the Ags with no points. With the drivers stacked out of the way, it was now time to look at the Constructors' Championship this season, and McLaren, the only team to get triple figure points, finishing first, who were 14 more than Ferrari, who got second place, ahead of Lotus with 75. Williams proving themselves to be a top 4 contender with 66 points, 40 more than the best of the rest team, which is Zach Speed. Brabham, 6th place, 5 points less than Zach Speed, ahead of Benetton, which Andrew Chesers scored all the points for them this season, and then Derek Warwick scoring the only 4 points for Ags this season. Then the final 3 teams, Minardi, the last point scorer with 3 points thanks to Giovanni Amati, and then the 2 teams that didn't get any points at all, Ligier and Larousse. Owls also didn't score any points this season, but they are not on this list because obviously they got bankrupt after the 14th round this season. With the Drivers and Constructors Championships done, it was now time to take a look at the engine improvements, see how they'll make an impact for Season 6 of this 1987 mod. First off, Renault have improved their engines. The only team that's using Renault engines was us, Minardi. So if their engines are improving, and if we stick with Renault, we might have a better chance of scoring more points than what we did this season. The second engine improvements we have is Ford. Now Ford is being used by Ferrari, Lotus, Williams and Benetton this season, so the teams have finished 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and then we had Benetton. So if Ford are improving their engines, maybe Ferrari and Lotus might beat McLaren in the Constructors' Championship, and Benetton might end up getting the best of the rest spot, which seems to be 5th place. The third engine improvement is Megatron engines. Now, Arrows was using Megatron engines this season before they went bankrupt. The only other team that was using Megatron engines was Ligier, so maybe Ligier might be slightly more competitive and maybe beat Larousse next season. The fourth engine improvement is Tag Porsche engines, which the only team using Tag Porsche is McLaren, so McLaren might still hold on to the Constructors' title for next season unless Ferrari and Lotus engines prove to be better than the improved Tag Porsche engines. The fifth and final engine improvement is Judd. Now, Judd was not being used by a single team this season. Though next season there is maybe a possibility a team might take Judd engines this next season. Who will it be? Will anyone take it at all? We'll find out next season. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this season of the 1987 mod. I'm going to put it out there. I was pretty annoyed with how Minardi finished this season because after last season we had 7 points. This season we only got 3 this season, and we were the last to score points this season. So I really thought this season we were going to be up there with maybe the top 6 maybe. That's what I thought we were going to achieve this season. But Giovanni Amati spinning off and Yari Nurman not having the pace I thought he was going to have for the season. Really disappointed how the season played out. I hope next season we at Minardi will improve and not end up down in the bottom 3 again. So thank you guys so much. I hope you're still enjoying this season, or this series as a whole, and hopefully next season we will be a bit more competitive than we were this season. Thank you guys so much for watching, and goodbye!